I held my water glass a little too tightly as my sister Marissa casually announced she would be moving into my house next week. She said it like she was talking about trying a new hobby, her smile bright as our father popped open a bottle of champagne to celebrate. The table was set with my mother's best china, something usually reserved for holidays, and Marissa was sitting at the head as if the night had been planned in her honor. That should have been my first warning. This wasn't a simple family dinner. It was an ambush. Marissa went on about already starting to pack, her voice calm, as if my approval wasn't necessary. My parents nodded in agreement, clinking their glasses as my father toasted to new beginnings. But I didn't raise my glass. Suddenly, the strange boxes I'd seen in the garage labeled Marissa's winter clothes and Marissa's books made sense. When I had asked her about them, she brushed me off, saying it was just temporary storage. I should have known. My parents had always covered for her. I remembered overhearing my mother on the phone last week, telling Aunt Sarah that I was so lonely in that big house, and that Marissa moving in would be perfect timing. As if my home and my life were simply tools to fix Marissa's struggles. My hands shook, but not from nerves, from anger. Marissa laughed lightly, saying this was good news for both of us, that I'd get company while she saved money on rent. But I had come prepared. Reaching into my purse, I pulled out the manila envelope I'd almost left behind. There was never a right time to go against my family's script, but tonight I decided it was going to be my time. I placed the envelope in the center of the table and told them I had news of my own. Instantly, the mood shifted. My mother's smile faded, my father frowned, and I could feel the silent pressure not to disrupt their perfect plan. For as long as I could remember, Marissa took and I gave, while my parents stood guard to enforce it. But tonight, that story was ending. I slid the papers from the envelope and laid them out for everyone to see. It was the sale agreement for my house. I told them I had already sold it last week and would be moving out in 30 days. The room froze. Marissa's champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. My father stammered for words, my mother's face hardened, and Marissa whispered in shock, "You what?" I pulled out my phone and opened the Pinterest board I had stumbled upon earlier that morning. Turning the screen toward them, I showed the board titled, Marissa's New Room. My mother and Aunt Sarah had been secretly planning my sister's bedroom in my house long before tonight's announcement. My throat tightened as their guilty expressions confirmed everything. I thought about the 9 years I had spent saving every spare penny, working overtime, skipping vacations, and giving up luxuries just to afford that house. It was supposed to be my dream home, the reward for all my sacrifices. Yet to them, it was nothing more than another resource to hand over to Marissa. My father abruptly stood, his voice commanding as he told me to cancel the sale, insisting there was still time to back out. My mother rose too, resting a hand on his arm, her voice soft but firm as she reminded me they had already promised Marissa she could stay as long as she needed. Then Aunt Sarah chimed in casually, admitting they had even planned to move most of Marissa's belongings into my house the following Tuesday while I was at work, all to make things easier. The weight of their coordinated betrayal hit me hard. I noticed Dorothy, my mother's oldest friend, sitting uncomfortably beside Aunt Sarah, her eyes fixed on her plate, too uneasy to meet mine. My father's tone grew sharp as he questioned how I'd handle my upcoming property taxes, reminding me pointedly that he always helped with those. His words carried a clear warning, compliance in exchange for financial support. My mother leaned in, her voice shifting into a soft concern I had heard too many times before. She suggested my decision was reckless, asked if I was feeling well, and wondered if I'd been taking care of myself. It was a familiar tactic. If I didn't bend to their expectations, then I must be unstable. It was how they had controlled me for years. Marissa's eyes filled with tears as she accused me of selling the house out of spite, claiming I had only done it because I knew she needed a place to stay. Her words landed like a punch to the chest. This was the cycle I knew too well. Her needs came first, my sacrifices dismissed, and my choices twisted into cruelty. The night began with what looked like a family dinner, but the champagne and fine china told me something bigger was coming. My suspicion was confirmed when my sister Marissa casually announced she'd be moving into my house next week, smiling as though she were sharing harmless news. My parents nodded proudly, raising their glasses to toast her new beginning. Boxes I'd found in my garage days earlier now made sense. She had already started moving in, without my consent. I remembered overhearing my mother on the phone, telling Aunt Sarah that I was lonely in that big house, and that it was the perfect time for Marissa to move in. It was clear this plan had been brewing behind my back. I felt the familiar anger rise, the old pattern playing out. Marissa takes, I give, and my parents enforce it. But this time, I had come prepared. I pulled out the manila envelope I'd almost left at home and placed it on the table. Calmly, I told them I had news of my own. I had sold the house last week and had only 30 days before I moved out. The room fell silent. Marissa's champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. My father gaped, my mother's smile vanished, and the air grew thick with shock. I showed them the Pinterest board I had found earlier that morning, labeled, Marissa's new room. My mother and Aunt Sarah had already been designing her space in my home while I was still living there. The betrayal hit hard. My father quickly ordered me to cancel the sale, insisting there was still time. My mother reminded me they had promised Marissa she could stay, while Aunt Sarah admitted they had even planned to move her things in while I was at work. The pressure came from every direction. My father dangled his once-a-year help with property taxes as leverage. My mother's tone shifted into false concern, questioning whether I was unwell for making such an impulsive decision. And then came the tears. Marissa accused me of selling the house just to spite her, as though my boundaries could only ever be acts of cruelty. I thought about explaining the truth, the roof replacement, the broken water line, the heating failure that made selling not just a choice but a necessity. But I knew it wouldn't matter. They had already painted me as the villain. So I simply told them the decision was final. The guilt trip followed immediately. My mother claimed I was leaving my sister homeless, my father insisted family helps family, and the room weighed heavy with their disappointment. But I held my ground, reminding them Marissa had her own apartment, and if that failed, she had their spare bedroom. For once, I refused to bend. As I gathered the papers back into the envelope, I felt a quiet squeeze of reassurance under the table. Dorothy, my mother's oldest friend, whispered, "Good for you." It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it felt monumental. The backlash didn't stop there. By the next morning, calls from relatives began pouring in. Aunt Sarah accused me of cruelty, saying I sold my home just to keep Marissa out. My sister's version of events spread fast. She told everyone I had betrayed her, and soon even distant relatives and family friends were calling to express their disappointment. On Facebook, Marissa posted vague words about loyalty and family, earning dozens of supportive comments, including one from my mother. By Thursday, the whispers had reached my workplace. A colleague pulled me aside, offering to connect Marissa with a church program for the homeless. My jaw tightened as I corrected her. Marissa wasn't homeless. She had an apartment, she had parents, she had options. But by then, the damage was done. My sister had painted me as heartless, and the story was spreading everywhere. Locked in a bathroom stall, phone trembling in my hand, I typed out a message to Marissa, not knowing whether to fight her lies head on or finally step back from a family that had always demanded everything of me while giving nothing in return. I finally texted Marissa, telling her to stop telling people I was making her homeless. I reminded her it wasn't true, and she knew it. Her reply came instantly, accusing me of selling the house she had been counting on. My chest tightened as I read her words, but I also knew the truth of why I had made that decision, a truth she refused to see. The reality was simple and brutal. The roof had been the first blow, more than $11,000 after heavy March storms revealed leaks in 3 different rooms. I emptied my vacation fund and took a small loan, convincing myself it was only a temporary setback. Then in April, the water line broke, costing another $8,000 for emergency repairs and landscape work. I gave up a long-planned trip to see my college roommate, picked up extra marketing jobs on the weekends, and lived on ramen dinners more often than I'd like to admit. By June, when the heating system failed and left me staring at a $5,000 bill I didn't have, I knew I couldn't keep patching holes in a sinking ship. Each night after work, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by spreadsheets and bank statements, running numbers over and over, hoping something would finally balance. It never did. That's when the crying started. Quiet, hidden tears that came after midnight when the world was asleep and no one could see. I had built an image of strength, the woman who waved politely to her neighbors each morning, the one who seemed capable and put together. But behind my closed doors, I was unraveling, drowning in debt and exhaustion, with no lifeline in sight. Each morning, the mirror reminds me of what this fight has cost me. The dark hollows under my eyes can't be hidden by makeup, and my collarbones stand out sharper than before. When my pants began to slip at the waist, I refused to buy smaller clothes. Instead, I punched new holes in my belt and told myself it was just temporary, like everything else. In the evenings, I boxed up my life piece by piece. 9 years of memories divided into piles marked keep, donate, or discard. Books that once covered my walls now sat stacked in neat cardboard towers. Wedding photos of friends, graduation pictures of cousins, and family vacations were all carefully wrapped and labeled in blue marker. I kept records of everything, bank statements in order, repair invoices filed, even text messages saved. It became my fortress of proof, a defense against the stories my family spun about me. While packing my office shelf, I came across a photograph I had almost forgotten. It was me, standing on the front porch the day I bought this house, clutching the keys with a smile so wide it looked unreal. The realtor had taken it by surprise, capturing the exact moment I realized I had done it. I had bought a home all on my own. I ran my fingers along the frame, remembering what that felt like. Pride without apology, accomplishment that belonged only to me, untouched by anyone else's approval. I placed the photo carefully on top of a box marked, "Keep," a quiet reminder of what I had built and what no one could take from me. That Saturday afternoon, while I was wrapping dishes in newspaper, the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw my parents' Buick in the driveway, with Marissa's little red car parked behind it. No warning call, no text, just them at my doorstep. The knocking grew louder until I finally opened the door. They walked in with the same somber air as funeral directors, judgment heavy in their eyes. My mother noticed the stacked boxes right away. "You're really going through with this madness?" she asked. I kept my hands busy, taping newspaper around another plate. "The closing is in 3 weeks," I said. Her voice rose. "Your sister needs you. You've always been selfish, but this is beyond understanding." The plate stayed steady in my hands, but inside, something shifted. I had spent my whole life being told what Marissa needed. The words slipped out before I could stop them. "Did anyone ever ask what I need?" My father cleared his throat, trying to soften the moment. But I didn't stop. "I need financial stability. I need to sleep at night without waking up in panic over bills. I need to not drain my retirement fund for house repairs I can't afford." For the first time, I didn't pause to give them my full attention. I didn't offer them a seat, or water, or the comfort they expected. I just kept packing. My mother's voice cracked between anger and disbelief. "We're your family." "Yes," I said, calmly. "And I've never once asked you for money. Not for college, not for my first apartment, not for this house, and not for the repairs that nearly drained me dry." Silence hung heavy. Marissa kept her eyes on the floor, and my father studied the ceiling as though it suddenly fascinated him. In that moment, I realized something important. I no longer needed their approval. The endless craving for validation I had carried since childhood had gone quiet, replaced with something stronger. As I reached for another stack of plates, I noticed the change in my body. My shoulders squared, my spine straightened, and my eyes met theirs directly instead of dropping down. It felt like the physical proof of an internal shift I had been waiting for. That evening, Dorothy showed up with Thai food and 2 bottles of wine. We packed photo albums together while she told me about the years she hadn't spoken to her sister because she refused to co-sign a loan. She handled a crystal vase from my grandmother with care and said softly, "Family patterns are the hardest to break. But sometimes breaking them is the only way forward." On Monday morning, I got an unexpected text from my colleague Thomas. "Need help moving? Got a truck and strong back. Just say when." A simple offer, but it struck me deeply. Family had always told me what I should give. He was asking what I needed. Later that afternoon, an email from Barbara, my financial advisor, confirmed my townhouse application was approved. "This move reduces your housing costs by 42%. The right decision for your long-term security." She ended with, "Call if you need anything else." Again, clear support without strings attached. As I read their messages over dinner, the contrast hit me. These people weren't demanding or accusing, they were stepping in to lighten the load. That night, I spread every financial document across the dining table. Bank statements, repair invoices, tax assessments, retirement withdrawals, the complete picture of why I had no choice but to sell my house. Tomorrow's family meeting wouldn't be another intervention for me. It would be their reckoning with the facts they'd refused to face. I held one advantage they didn't know about. The sales agreement included a 30-day rent-back clause. Even after closing, I would have time to finalize the townhouse purchase. Breathing room, a safety net. At 7 o'clock Tuesday evening, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, the porch was full. Not just my parents and Marissa, but Aunt Sarah, Uncle Robert, and my cousin Jennifer. A firing squad disguised as family. I stood at the head of the dining table, manila folder in hand, a position that felt strangely natural. My fingers no longer trembled as I opened it. Before anyone says another word, I began, "I need you to see something." My voice carried a steadiness I barely recognized. The group looked larger than I expected. My parents, Marissa, Aunt Sarah, and Uncle Robert on one side, and on mine, a quiet circle of support, Dorothy, Barbara, and Thomas. One by one, I laid the papers across the table, carefully arranged in order. Bank statements, contractor invoices, retirement account records. Each one a piece of the truth I had carried alone. "This," I said, sliding the first sheet to the center, "is the invoice for last spring's roof replacement. $11,200. I laid the next paper on the table. The shingles were supposed to last 30 years. They didn't. Insurance refused to cover a dime. Uncle William leaned closer, adjusting his glasses as if to study the figures himself. His frown etched deep lines across his face. I added another invoice. Water line repair, $8,200. When the city updated the main line, it exposed my failing connection. No warning, no payment plan, just a bill I had no way to avoid. My mother shifted in her chair but stayed unusually quiet. Finally, I placed the last sheet down. Heating system replacement, $5,000. The rebate covered barely a quarter of it. 3 major blows in 1 year, the financial nightmare of home ownership laid bare. I didn't drop my gaze. For once, I held steady eye contact. From the far end of the table, Barbara gave a small nod, her silent encouragement grounding me. I placed my bank statement on top of the pile. My emergency fund is gone. Barbara advised me to sell while the market is strong rather than wait until I'm forced under. Marissa shoved her chair back, the scrape loud against the floor. "This is creative accounting, Eden. You've always been good with numbers when it suits you. You're just trying to escape your responsibilities to this family." I braced for the usual wave of agreement, but instead Uncle William turned to her. His tone was sharp. "Marissa, what's your current employment situation? Last I heard, you were between jobs." The question caught her off guard. She faltered, eyes darting around. "I'm exploring opportunities. The job market is complicated right now." My mother rushed to cover for her. "William, this isn't about employment. Family duty exists regardless of finances. Eden always had that beautiful home with extra space." Before I could reply, Aunt Sarah chimed in, slipping her glasses down to study the heating bill in front of her. "Why can't Marissa stay with you and Roger? You just redecorated that guest room." The conversation shifted like a tide, away from me, swirling around the room as voices overlapped. They began debating who owed what, who had the space, who had the money. The spotlight that had been fixed on me for so long was finally moving. From the corner, Dorothy cleared her throat. Her voice cut through the chatter. "I've known this family for 20 years. Dorothy was the first to break through the noise. Eden bought her house without a penny of family support," she said firmly. "Meanwhile, I've watched Marissa receive help with rent, car payments, even credit card bills, over and over again." Her words carried the weight of long observation, the truth everyone had seen but few had dared to say. Barbara straightened her blazer before adding her perspective. "As Eden's financial advisor, I'll tell you this, enabling financial dependency harms everyone. The giver drains their resources, while the receiver never learns the skills they need to survive." Thomas leaned forward, his quiet voice steady. "My brother lived with my parents until he was 42. They paid his bills, scheduled his appointments, solved every problem. When they passed, he didn't know how to function. Within a year, he lost the house they'd left him. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is stop rescuing someone." The room grew unusually quiet as these outside voices cut through the mythology my family had been living under for decades. For once, the truth wasn't coming from me, it was echoing from others. Uncle William finally spoke, his tone softer than I expected. "Eden, why didn't you tell us about these struggles sooner?" The question caught me off guard. For years, privacy and independence had been my armor. But maybe opening up to the right people could finally build the support system I never thought possible. Before I could answer, I noticed my father. He sat in silence, eyes fixed on the floor, not interrupting for once. My mother's rigid posture softened, her hands unclenching, palms resting open on the table. Then Marissa shot to her feet, clutching her purse. "This is ridiculous. You're all treating me like I'm some parasite. Eden's always been the golden child with her perfect house and perfect job. while nobody notices how hard my life has been. Her voice cracked, but when no one jumped to defend her, she stormed out. The slam of the door echoed through the house. Uncle William let the silence settle before speaking again. I think it's time we had a real family financial planning session, for everyone. He looked squarely at my parents, making it clear that Marissa was part of that, everyone. My mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but for once, they weren't turned into weapons against me. My father reached for her hand, his face unreadable, his silence louder than any argument. For the first time in one of these family confrontations, I didn't feel like the villain. I finished packing the last of my kitchen glasses, wrapping each one in newspaper, calm and precise. This time, I knew I wasn't the one in the wrong. The final week of my 30-day countdown arrived, and the house already felt hollow. Every box packed seemed to strip away another layer of memory, leaving the walls bare and the air heavy with absence. When the doorbell rang, I wasn't surprised. Right on time, my parents had never been late when there was an agenda to push. I opened the door to find them both on the porch, with Marissa standing close behind, the three of them a united front. My mother gripped her purse so tightly her knuckles looked pale. My father's smile felt forced, polished for performance. "Let us in, honey," my mother said quickly, already stepping past me without waiting. "We've been talking, and we think we've come up with the perfect solution." "A compromise," my father added, his voice carrying that too bright cheerfulness he always used when trying to manage a difficult conversation. Marissa trailed after them, scanning the half-packed living room before fixing her gaze on me, her expression carefully arranged into gratitude. "I really appreciate you hearing us out," she said softly. They settled themselves onto my couch, the only piece of furniture left uncovered, while I stayed standing. The imbalance was clear, and intentional. "We know the house sale is your decision," my mother began, laughing nervously. "But instead of Marissa moving in with you, what if you helped her find her own place? Just a little financial boost to get her started." My father nodded eagerly, though he avoided mentioning any real figures. "With your success, it would hardly make a dent for you." Marissa's voice followed, quiet and deliberate. "Some people just have bad luck, you know. Not everyone gets the opportunities you've had. You're successful." The words hung between us, heavy with expectation, as if my hard work and sacrifice had somehow been luck, and now belonged to them, too. My mother leaned forward, her voice dropping as if we were co-conspirators. "She's struggling, Eden. You owe her this. The family has always stuck together. If you won't help your sister, don't expect me to keep helping you." The threat was sharp, wrapped in motherly concern. I turned away from them, walking toward the dining room table where I had laid out a neat stack of documents. Their confidence flickered into unease as I picked up a pre-approval letter. "I'm meeting with my lender tomorrow," I said, holding the paper steady. "It's for a townhouse downtown. The monthly payment will be almost 40% less than what I pay here." I handed the letter to my father, watching his eyes widen at the numbers. "This isn't about Marissa," I continued firmly. "It's about me. Selling this house means rebuilding my emergency savings after years of draining them on repairs. It means reducing my stress. It means finally choosing my financial health." My mother opened her mouth to protest, but I raised a hand to silence her. "I can't support Marissa financially. But I can help her support herself." I pulled a small card from my pocket and held it out toward my sister. She froze, eyes narrowing. "Our marketing department has an entry-level position opening next week. The salary would cover rent on a modest one-bedroom apartment. I already spoke to HR, they're willing to interview you." Marissa's lips parted, but no words came. For once, she was silent. "This isn't charity," I said, steady but calm. "It's an opportunity. Whether you take it or not, that's your choice." My father pushed himself up from the couch, walking toward the window where nail hooks sat empty, the family photos already packed away. "Eden, be reasonable. Marissa needs." "No," I cut in sharply, stepping toward the coffee table. "This is what being reasonable looks like." I opened a manila folder and slid a spreadsheet across the table. Neat rows of numbers stared back at them, car payments, rent supplements, credit card bailouts, all recorded, all adding up. At the bottom of the spreadsheet, the number I had circled in red made my mother gasp. "I only pulled this from what you've said in front of me," I explained softly. "I'm sure the real total is even higher." My father's brow furrowed as he studied the page, his silence heavy. "This isn't love," I said quietly. "It's dependence. And it's hurting all of us." He opened his mouth, but no words came. My mother's voice broke instead, trembling with guilt. We just wanted to help her. The best help, I replied, my heart pounding but my voice steady, is teaching someone to stand on their own. You taught me that once. Remember when I wanted to quit college because I thought I couldn't handle it? Dad, you wouldn't let me move back home. You told me to find a tutor, to push through. You said making life too easy would do me no favors. I let the memory sink in. Funny how those lessons seem to change depending on which daughter we're talking about. The room went still, the only sound the sticky pull of packing tape from a half-sealed box. My father finally wrapped an arm around my mother and spoke quietly. We should go. They moved toward the door, my mother's eyes avoiding mine. Marissa lingered, her gaze flicking to the business card still resting in my hand. I don't need your charity job, she muttered, though the words lacked their usual bite. I set the card down on the entryway table. It's not charity, it's opportunity. As she turned to follow my parents out, I caught the smallest of movements. She slipped the card into her purse when she thought I wasn't looking. The door shut behind them, and I stood in my half-packed living room, listening to the sound of their car fade into the distance. The silence left behind wasn't empty anymore. It felt spacious, like air rushing into lungs that had been held too long. I sank into the couch, tracing my hand over the fabric I'd soon wrap for storage. Tomorrow it would join the rest of my things, waiting for the move into the townhouse. 9 years of life had been lived inside these walls, and now I was stepping into something unknown. The mix of emotions was sharp, freedom and loneliness, triumph and uncertainty. The thought of next month's family dinner crept into my mind. Would they still want me there? Or had this reckoning drawn a line we couldn't cross back over? The answering machine blinked with messages, no doubt filled with more opinions I wasn't ready to hear. I ignored it, letting my mind linger instead on the business card Marissa had quietly slipped into her purse. Maybe that was the beginning of something different, for both of us. Weeks later, sunlight streamed across the wide windows of my new downtown loft, spilling warmth across the hardwood floors. When I first signed the lease, this space felt like compromise, like giving up a dream. Now it felt like mine in a way the old house never had. I checked my budget app, watching the new mortgage payment glow in green, 30% lighter than before. For the first time in years, the numbers gave me a sense of peace. Barbara's weekly check-ins turned what had once been a source of panic into a routine that steadied me. On the kitchen island sat my newest purchase, a professional-grade camera. Something I once considered an unreachable luxury had now become an investment in myself. Tomorrow night, my first photography class would begin. For the first time in a long while, the future felt wide open, and it was mine to claim. This story follows Eden's journey of breaking free from family pressure, hidden financial struggles, and years of carrying responsibilities that were never hers alone. What begins as a painful decision to sell her home transforms into a bold act of reclaiming independence. By exposing years of imbalance, confronting her parents' favoritism, and refusing to enable her sister's dependence, Eden shows the power of boundaries and self-respect. Her move into a new townhouse is more than just a change of address, it symbolizes a shift toward freedom, clarity, and financial stability. The professional camera and photography class represent her decision to finally invest in herself rather than in others' expectations. The conclusion is clear. Sometimes strength means saying no, even to family, and choosing peace over pressure. Eden's story is a reminder that personal growth often comes from letting go, setting firm boundaries, and stepping into the life you truly deserve. A powerful story of breaking free from family pressure, reclaiming independence, and choosing financial freedom over toxic expectations. Thank you so much for staying with us through this story. Your support means everything. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. More powerful and emotional stories are coming your way. Your engagement keeps this channel alive, and together, we'll continue exploring real stories that inspire, challenge, and connect us.